Good afternoon, and welcome to another edition of Black Press Live, where we speak to our distinguished publishers. Today, we have three distinguished publishers joining us from Los Angeles. We have Lisa Collins of LA Focus. In Cincinnati, we have Walter White from the Cincinnati Herald. And
Hello.
from Rolling Out, we have Randy Fling. Thank you so much for joining us, publishers, and it's always good to see your faces.
Good to be here.
Great.
Yeah.
Great.
So Lisa, we're gonna start with you out in LA. Ladies first, as they say. Lisa, tell the viewers a little bit about LA Focus.
Okay, well, LA Focus celebrated 25 years this year. I used to be a writer with Billboard. I was with Billboard magazine for 14 years and decided I'd rather do some local stuff in addition to Billboard. So I started a newspaper. One of the things that I found at Billboard was while I was a gospel editor, and there were record companies that could not get products in the church and could not, and though people sang every Sunday morning, they weren't advertising that these were big gospel artist songs. They were just saying, it's a great song. So the record companies were really trying to do that. So that was the kind of my inspiration to start LA Focus, to give a venue for them to get into that community. And to also, being a third generation PK, whose father was very involved with Martin Luther King, I wanted to I saw the church as the heart of the Black community. So I wanted to make sure that I include faith-based as a key element. And what turned out to be is they were my biggest distribution point, in addition to traditional distribution points. So we got a great buy-in from record companies. So actually, those labels actually funded me going into so they bought out ads for like a whole year or two. And then, so it kind of gave me a bit of a cushion going into the marketplace. And then the churches kind of also bumped up. And that's how LA Focus was born. And so It's been a good kind of thing. Over the last, we have First Ladies High Tea that we were doing that attracted 700 to 1,000 women every year. We have, we do a lot of faith outreach, or we're seen as a partner when it comes to faith outreach. So it's been pretty good.
Yeah, absolutely. Sounds pretty good in a very competitive market as well.
Yes.
Walter White, it's good to see you. A year ago, we were all in your town, out in Cincinnati, the NNPA Black Press for the annual convention. We talked earlier this month, or late last month, to Jan Michelle Kearney. But Walter, tell us a little bit about what's new in Cincinnati. What are you guys covering today?
Well, actually, we're covering all the. We kind of like moved into phase. Well, I don't know what phase you're gonna call COVID. Okay, but we're into that next phase of COVID. Let's say review, and we're also now kind of from the protest standpoint. We're kind of moving into, let's look at who the people are who created the protest. Let's see what their agendas are. We've gotten some review, and we also have gotten some just extraordinary. We're kind of moving pieces, into see what their agendas are. We've got the same review.
Go ahead.
Okay. And so we're basically trying to go into phase 2 and 3. COVID had wreaked its ugly head again, and our county, unfortunately, numbers went up. Although when we were totally locked down, our numbers took they wasn't the greatest on the dive scale, but they were doing better. Now we're kind of up again in our county, Hamilton County, Southwest Ohio. We're kind of not in the greatest position. So we're back to working at it, but we are getting more test sites up, and we're getting a lot of people checked out, including WA. I got to get my test. And so, but I'm not that I know, I'm not positive. But I think the most important thing is, we're sharing some of the history right now with John Lewis, because we were very fortunate. Like everybody on this set here knows that in the early 60s, they were moving civil rights leaders out of the South to actually save their lives. and we were blessed to get Fred Shuttlesworth.
Oh wow,
So
yeah.
yeah, so we've had, you know, that type of environment around our paper and our publications for a long time. So this John Lewis thing is it's phenomenal, because what he did and how he did it and the courage he displayed doing it is not only something that inspired us for all these years, but now that the young people are tuning into this man, it just makes their movement even more important, because they know that there's been a lot of freedom fighters for like, what, 401 years now? Have been freedom fighters. And now they're tuning in. They're getting it.
Yeah.
So that's where we're kind of at right now, just trying to make sure we acknowledge and bring to the forefront the protest leaders. We're going to actually start putting some COVID information in our paper starting next week, just to kind of highlight the reality and the severity of this dreaded virus. And then, of course, this whole civil rights piece and the history and how you put them both together. And you can see that we're still kind of fighting some of the same battles that were fought 50, 60, 70 years ago.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for that. And Rolling Out does a tremendous job in a lot of different aspects. And we always continue to be amazed by what you accomplish. What are you guys working on this week? Or actually today, because you guys are working on something every second.
Every day.
So.
Well, you know, I would echo, you know, the COVID has really been important for us. And one of the things we've done is started doing live streams, you know, early on during this whole COVID time. So we have a weekly show now every Tuesday night that's called Health IQ. I'm sorry, I'm going to just mute my computer. I heard some dings. I don't want to hear anymore. So that's one of the things. I mean, obviously tomorrow will be another day of that. We do it every Tuesday evening. For us, you know, the protest has been an interesting thing, because Atlanta was certainly one of the cities where the protest was very active. We were doing people down there live from a lot of the sites of the protest, as well as even in Minneapolis. So we were doing some of our shows at that time, our evening show, with people broadcasting in live to us from Minneapolis and, of course, from the streets of Atlanta. I think that what we've seen in this last, well, you know, since COVID, let's just look at that whole period of time, has been for all of us a really big change in the dynamics of, for us anyway, how we've gathered the news. You know, we've gone to Zoom and become, and again, I say Zoom, it could be anybody, but to the simulcasting and the live casting and creating of shows, because, you know, there's not in-person interviewing with people.
Yeah.
And one of the things that we've really seen is the difference in attitudes and beliefs between generations. And that's one of the more troubling things that we have noticed. And I'll mention two things I find troubling right now. One is the attitude difference of people that are older and younger. And, you know, I just think that a lot of the younger people, and we've seen the actions in Florida and, you know, the beaches, and in Atlanta, Georgia was the first state really to open back up. You know, the nail salons, the beauty salons, and that's why I have a hat on. I haven't been yet. In about 5 months. I'm coming out with something different. I think I'm gonna do a little different actual look to my hair when I do. But anyway, and I think that, you know, we've continued to try to push that issue so that I think we can all be on the same page, that as a community, A, we're being hit harder by COVID than anybody else. B, it takes the younger generation, middle-agers, and seniors to kind of work together to protect us all. So, you know, that's been a big push for us. And the second one has been the economic side of it is, you know, with the protests, let's not let the protests be about just justice for jails and police. Let's not focus it so narrow. We got all this energy and attention. Let's let it be about the economics of Black business and where we are, and keep that as much on the forefront as other things. Because when I see big companies give, I want to say Nike, maybe 40 million they're giving to social justice causes over the next 4 years or whatever. Well, that's really great. you know, somebody gave Spelman College 40 million, and another Morehouse 40 million, and 40 million to the UNCF. And I think those are great. I will say this: if that same money was given to enough Black businesses, we could support Spelman all by ourselves. We could support our own justice, social justice causes, and we could buy all the politicians that we need as well. So I'm gonna stop on that note.
Buy all politicians, huh?
Buy as many as we need. Not the ones we currently have. Because, you know, Dr. Claude Anderson said that. I got to give him the credit. He said, you know, we got it wrong. We were so busy getting the vote that if we had economics, and he used the phrase, so I'm really, you can always find love from politicians if you're supporting their cause.
There you go. You know, and speaking of COVID, just as a brief note that tonight we will, at 7 o'clock right here, we're going to have the Surgeon General of the United States, Dr. Adams, on tonight at 7. And then on Thursday at noon, none other than Dr. Anthony Fauci will join the Black Press USA Live. So stay tuned. Lisa Collins out in LA. You know, we talked about Atlanta and what's going on down there, but I want to segue using Atlanta as a backdrop, because we know that John Lewis, the great congressman, will be buried there in Atlanta next to his wife Lillian. What's the mindset for you guys in covering this historic week of activities surrounding John Lewis?
You know, I think that Walter made a good point when he said it's good for this generation to see the legacy of a John Lewis, because I don't think they understood. Like, I think that there's been such a generation gap. I think there are kids who don't even know that you couldn't drink from the same water fountain. They find that crazy, the fact that we couldn't do so much. The Jim Crow South was so harsh for Blacks. They don't understand that. So I think it's good to see that in rolling out this history of John Lewis, now they're able to see that, oh, okay, he's an OG. He wasn't, you know, he's not lame. He's not an older guy who didn't understand what we're going through. This guy got beat within an inch of his life and dedicated his life on the front lines and thought, I might get killed today. I don't know if these kids are going out into these protests now thinking that that's going to happen to them. I think they think like we have cover in each other or whatever. But when John Lewis and the King and the people, they had no cover. They were just out there in a society where you could legally beat Black people to death and nothing would happen to you. So I think it's good for them to see that. And I think that's the point we're covering it from, is like the legacy and how to juxtapose today's protesters with the protesters of yesteryear. And I think that John Lewis is such a good example that we can share with them.
Yeah, Walter White, I want you, and perhaps the three of you can discuss this, the significance. Over the weekend, John Lewis's body was taken across the Edmund Pettus Bridge for the final time. You know, back in 1965, when he came across that bridge, the state troopers were there with clubs and tear gas and other instruments of disaster, of destruction. And as Lisa Collins mentioned, he was bloodied and beaten to almost killed. But this time, when his body came across the bridge, the state troopers were there to salute him. Can you guys talk about the impact or even just that idea of John Lewis now being saluted by the state troopers there in Alabama?
Well, if you don't mind, I'd like to just say this. I think it's what's they call it poetic justice. Is that the word? Poetic justice? Because last week in one of our editorial meetings, we were talking about that. And I said, you know, we really wish we could have that picture of John Lewis getting drug off that bus and beaten. So that's where they cracked his skull. And so that we can make sure that the full velocity of what happened to him twice and probably a third time that we don't know about, is set forth for these young folks to know that the sacrifice is all of ours. It's yours, it's mine, it's your grandparents, because they had the John Lewis of their time. The only problem was those people in the early 1900s couldn't talk about it. Couldn't talk about it. We know about one or two. We know about Tulsa. We know about the Rosewood, but we don't know about all the other times. And I like to share with young people all the time. Don't think we just sat idly by and let them run over us. We had a civil rights movement because not only are the great Black Americans who were in here, male and female, but a lot of the soldiers came back from World War II, and they were like, oh, so I'm over there fighting for you, but I can't walk on the same side of the street when I come home. So I think we're in a place now where we can merge this information with the young people. Now, I use a term, it's just my term, and I say to the young folks, we, the children of the civil rights movement, are here for you. We're going to support you. We are listening to you. Don't forget to use us when you need us, because we understand who movement this is, because our parents had a movement and we participated in it.
Yeah, and I want to go back to Rolling Out and how they approach things. And I know you guys have a national focus, whereas our other publishers are more locally focused. Can you explore for us some of the differences and how that approach, how you take that approach to your audience?
Well, I think one of the things that the advantage that any local publication or local media does is just the fact that the conversations are local brings people in, brings them in. They're interested because it's happening in their neighborhood. With us, obviously in Atlanta being, and Chicago is real big for us, and a few other markets, when we have people there. So for them, they feel when they're seeing localized things, it really brings them into the Rolling Out. But for other people that may be in, a place that we're not, when we're bringing news that's national, we tend to, of course, use a lot of it that's around the biggest possible name sometimes. So it may be around, we may get quotes from somebody who's a Hollywood person, a name that people know, people in the music business, because that's what kind of brings people together across geo boundaries throughout the country and even the world. I was looking at something today, and 10% of our traffic was not even US based, actually, or 9% just today at one particular moment. But it was interesting that it's UK, which I assume is the Black population in London, would be my assumption of where in the UK it's mostly coming from, was the next biggest place that people were really tuning in to what we were saying. And I'm sure hopefully we're an outlet for them to see, just like we're watching what's happening in Europe now with the protests and things that they've had, that they're tuning in to us for that same reason, to get the news on a broader scale.
Yeah, and as always, I'm sorry, Lisa, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, for us, when we get involved locally, it's what we find is that we want to make sure that they know what they're voting on. I know we're in an election year. We have some controversial legislation on our ballots here. So we partner with people to do town halls. We also just focus in on the legislation just to point out both sides. So we do a lot of that locally. The other thing is, sometimes news gets erroneously reported by the major papers in our city. But we had a situation where we had a local historical mall that was reported as had been sold, and it hadn't. And so we brought to light a local story like that, and the people that were buying it or had said they had acquired it, they'd actually put out a press release. They were big time gentrifiers. And so as a result of that story, that there was a lot of protest, and those people backed off, and the mall is now has a chance to be sold to a black group. So a black investment group. So there are some stories that's the natural advantage of being local and really impacting news on the spot and in your city.
Yeah. Hey, Lisa, if I could add a comment to that, I like that because, most of my friends that are in politics, they always remind me, people tend to talk about who's the president in the national things, but the things that really affect most of our lives day in and day out are the local politics, exactly the things you're talking about, the legislation on the county and state ballot that are going to affect the people more than who's in the White House.
That we don't see because we don't even know what it's about. So they kind of slip it in. We go in the voting booth and we say, what is this? What is proposition this? We don't know,
Sounds like you all live in Ohio.
You guys have that same problem.
Oh, yeah. We're in Southwest Ohio. We're kind of like Lisa's county and LA County. We're very, very conservative county.
Mm.
Yeah.
Well,
I think in voter registration and voter, importance of things is if there were better explanations and people had better understandings of those across the board, that really, is an American political problem, should I say.
Yeah.
Really.
As always, we always want to recognize some of those who are watching. With Michelle, who is someone who watches regularly. We always are glad to have with Michelle. She says, good afternoon, everyone. Peace and blessings. Maria James is also watching. Thank you, Maria. And of course, as always, we have other publishers who tune in, especially Bobby Henry at the West Side Gazette down in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. And to your point, Bobby says, you mean politicians can be bought? So, look, I'm going to leave that between you and Bobby. So, one of the questions we generally ask our publishers, especially with COVID, is what can the Black press do? What else can the Black press do? What can your publications do to help save Black lives? Don't be quiet.
Ladies first.
Ladies first.
We actually did partner with the Facebook Journalism Project to bring more light to COVID. So we've started some podcasts. We're doing a lot of stuff to just keep it in front of people. We're actually, LA is a hot spot, as you know. We're the county in the nation with the largest number of COVID cases. So we feel it critically important to get information out, to keep information out. People are getting tired of this. As they say, people are getting tired of COVID, but it's not getting tired of us. So we're really trying to keep people on top of what the latest things are, particularly as unemployment dries up, as the mortgages or the mortgage situation, the eviction situation, the landlords. There's a lot of stuff. We're finding there's so much news to cover when it comes to COVID that it's not difficult to get it. It's just keeping up with it and getting it out to people. So that is a key thing for us. Well, we have a special insert in every publication we do, and we just try and highlight what's happening is we don't want it to get lost in everything else. People still have to live their lives. We have to do a balance of news and COVID coverage that keeps people interested, because if they see too much COVID, they're like, I'm tired of this. They're out of there. So we kind of tease it and kind of do a delicate balancing act of a little COVID, a little this, but bring them along, wear your mask, all that. So it's been kind of challenging, but the most challenging part is keeping up with the things that we think people need to know to keep them safe.
And before the gentleman jump in on that, let me just ask Lisa a question. She mentioned she used the terminology earlier when we were talking about John Lewis as OG. Well, I think Lisa's a bit of an OG. Look behind her. There's a typewriter.
That is something that, as a writer, I have. Actually, that was gifted to me, and it's one of my, it's an old-fashioned typewriter.
Is it an IBM?
I don't think so. I think it is
electric.
No, it's a Remington typewriter.
Well, there you go. Oh gosh. So I'm gonna continue on with the aforementioned question. Let's go to Cincinnati. Your response on what you guys can do, what the Black press can continue to do to help save Black lives.
Well, the Black press is one of the main focal points for African Americans to get the information that they really can trust, okay? Because there's a lot of stuff out there, and I'll just use the word stuff that just in a lot of cases doesn't make any sense. So, you know, what was one of the early versions of COVID-19? Who can be affected? Who can't be affected? They talked about older people were the only ones could be affected. There were a lot of blacks in a lot of black communities saying, we black people don't get it. Then what happens? A month later, well, guess who's affected? Well, us in the media business already knew who was going to be affected first before it was talked about on the national level. We knew what was going to be affected first. So one of the things we're doing as we're continually building out our social media and our website platforms, we're just trying to make sure that we're keeping the message out there that everybody needs to stay aware of COVID-19. We just entered into agreement with the city of Cincinnati to actually show every week the sliding scales, and in our case, the rising scales of COVID infections on our front page. This was a request that came from the city of Cincinnati itself, because they knew that at one point we were kind of flattening the curve, but then, and I think everybody we know in life is pretty much driven by what they see. And when they opened us up about 7.5 Fridays ago, it looked like it wasn't 10%. It looked like it was 100%. So here we go after spending weeks trying to educate our community that wear the mask, wear the gloves, stay inside. Once they opened it up, there was never a 10% or 20% soft opening. People just threw everything to the wayside and went right back to living. Not 3 weeks after it was opened up, probably about 24 hours right after it was opened up. So we are constantly just getting the message out there. We have what we call a group of influencers, which is on our digital platform. They're on every week. Just this past week, COVID was one of the main topics with the influencers. We also have a show that we're trying to communicate. It's called Lit 513, another digital platform where we're trying to talk to the younger people, like the 15 to 25, and tell them about COVID, because I know some of you guys, if not all you guys, are aware of the young man in Texas who passed 3 Fridays ago. He was 20 years old. He had attended a COVID party, and he told the nurse, "I am so sorry. I thought it was just a hoax." And the next day he passed away. We're trying to get as much information as fast as we can on a quality and quantity basis to make sure everybody in the minority community has no misconception that, as you said, COVID, as it was said, COVID is not going away. Lisa said it is not going away, and it's getting deeper and deeper every day.
Yeah.
Well, not much left to say after what Lisa said.
Yeah, I noticed that.
I'm sorry.
There.
I mean, you know, hey, it's okay though. No, it's all good. I mean, again, we're very, very much like both of them, just trying to keep the message up front. So even when it's not our health show and it's our morning, more entertainment type show, that we at least always bring it up. You know, in Atlanta, 4th of July, they had a big club. I mean, this huge nightclub. They built a pool, an indoor pool, and they had the biggest 4th of July pool party, and a video of it came out. And it was, so we had to show that, of course, but just to show how people were not taking it serious. And we were already on an uptick by then. Georgia opened. We've been on an uptick. We've been in the number 4 or 5 slot nationally, like per 100,000 people, new cases per 100,000 people for the last, since I've been seeing those numbers. I know the NPR came out with a map that does it by per 100,000 people. And, you know, people, you know, we tell people, like, look at New York State. They were the worst. They had problems, huge problems. They did something about it, and they were able to get results. Here we are in Georgia, where our governor has sued the mayor for having a executive order that you have to wear a mask everywhere. It confounds me, and it's still in the court. I mean, I think the judge sent it to arbitration. But you talk about mixed messages when you have leadership in the country and leadership at the state level that are saying things that just don't follow the science. And I think, we just try to tell people the science says this, so stop listening to some of the other things that you're hearing. Follow the science. I'm glad you guys are going to have the Surgeon General on, and let continue to let our people hear the facts from the scientists who are doing the work. So we have epidemiologists on our show each week, pretty much, that we do our health show, who talks about this spread and talks about, how it really is being spread person to person. So, pretty much let me echo them and say, yes, we're all trying to keep it out there. Very important for us to keep our community safe.
Yeah, absolutely. And yes, we are going to have the U.S. Surgeon General on 7 p.m. right here this evening on Dr. Adams. And then on Thursday at noon, Dr. Anthony Fauci. LA Focus, Lisa Collins. You mentioned earlier about the Facebook, working with Facebook on that grant. Did your publication, were you able to participate in the PPP funding?
We got a little. We didn't get that much PPP funding, and it's helped. I mean, everything helps. We've really benefited from a lot of the stuff. What we've been able to is in our partnerships through the church or through our outreach, we've been able to meet a lot of people, and that's what's really helped us get through this crisis. We made a lot of unique and innovative partnerships that are critical to our survival as a newspaper. And so that's helped more than the PPP funding. The Facebook journalism grant was great. And it allowed us to go in areas we hadn't been in before, like podcasts, like having a mobile app that we can put on websites, bumping up our digital from once a week to twice weekly. So we were able to do a lot, and to, of course, build out our staff a little bit more so we could do more local stuff. So that's been good. But the PPP funding, we did get some, but not a lot.
Yeah, I see rolled out for a moment. So walk away.
Had to roll out to get some of that information out there.
I would like to say something, though. I think that what this COVID stuff has really hampered is our efforts to deal with the census. And that has been something that we've really been challenged to try and see, because as one of the legislators came on one of our broadcasts and said, one of our joint broadcasts with the church, and said that in our neighborhood, it just really isn't happening. The census, people aren't taking the census. They aren't doing what they should be doing. And that's going to be critical to all of our survival as a Black community. And so we're just trying to think of innovative ways we can keep that out there. But it's really being kind of devastated by COVID.
Yeah. And Walter White, Cincinnati Herald, the PPP funding, were you guys able to take advantage of any of that?
I would just basically say that it probably helped, but it didn't, fill all the stopgaps. So again, we're building out, especially in our digital area, to for example, we all know the political season is pretty much upon us, and we want to make sure that we are prioritizing our marketing and sales to really focus on delivering a complete package of sale tools to the campaigns. And as we all know, that digital is one of the first things they ask for, especially on the local level. I think people are surprised local politicians are pretty shrewd. And one of the things that we've noticed over the past 10 or 12 years, that a lot of them don't even have campaign offices. They kind of working out of their own homes. And so they want to make sure everything they use are the dollars they're going to have for election or re-election. And at this point, fundraising is a problem for them too. So I wish there had been some PPP form monies for politicians, because we all know that they're going to struggle. They're going to struggle with fundraising this year, and which affects all of us because of our uniqueness as a marketplace. we get that type of advertising. So it's okay. I would just like to say we should have been the first, and I mean minority corporations should have been the first to get the money, and then everybody else should have got it after us, because we're the ones who fight the resourcing game every day of the week.
Yeah, absolutely. Randy, rolling out.
We
Were you guys
did
able?
also.
Okay.
We
Okay.
did also, and very thankful for it. I will say that we certainly lost a lot of advertisers. I mean, people, their businesses weren't open, so they weren't going to advertise. And most of them, again, with us dealing more with a lot of national companies, what they did was first they would contact us and say, well, we're not going to do second quarter. It was near the end of the first quarter. We're going to finish up March. We're not going to do second quarter. We'll keep everything else in place. And about a week or two later, they would say, well, the client said we got to cancel the rest of the year. We'll see what we can, if we can, depending on what happens with COVID, maybe we can come back in. But originally you were on an annual, you were scheduled quarterly with us for a certain amount. So we took a lot of hits from the major, the national companies, because most of them just weren't, they're not going to advertise. And they didn't know how to advertise. They didn't know what to advertise because so much was changing at the time. So we're real thankful for PPP because it did play a role and allowed us to, keep our people on.
Yeah, and it's interesting because we see a lot of these companies that now, since the George Floyd situation, it's Hulu, Amazon, Disney, all these companies now are advertising or at least making these huge statements, taking out full-page ads in mainstream papers and on television that Black Lives Matter. Are we able to, or have any of you been able to make any connections with those companies? And I guess we can start again.
No such ads over here. No such ads over here. I don't know about Walter.
I'll say that's my theme moving forward, because
ours too.
Yeah, it's like you benchmarking and you trademarking everything that's your ad that says Black Lives Matter. But when these Black lives are coming to you to help save Black lives, you have to have some monies that you need to be putting out there to us. And I wouldn't say it that way. I'll do it in a very mainstream, respectful way. But why say one thing and then wait for us to make it happen? We are your vehicle. Help us help you. And it's easy to tag your ads because you're making money from those ads. So you're saying that, what about the people who are actually touching the people who you think you're touching? Because we're the ones that are touching them. They're not necessarily touching them, other than they may see that ad if they're looking at TV, if they're looking at their phones, but they're not going to see what we're going to provide, because we're providing the whole, as they say, package to the community. And the community comes to us to get the information. They're more likely to look at it in one of our ads in our papers or on our digital platform than they are to see it on TV, because even my wife would say, oh, here go another one of those Black Lives Matter commercials. And she just tunes out.
Yeah, we see it, Walter, and Major League Baseball has opened up their season, and on the back of every pitcher's mound is the Black Lives Matter symbol. The Boston Red Sox took out a huge banner by the bridge there, Black Lives Matter. There's the NFL, there's the National Basketball Association. LA Focus, Lisa Collins, you want to weigh in on that?
Yeah, I think that's where the unique relationship we have with the faith community and doing some faith outreach has paid off, is that some of those corporations do reach out to do things in the community, and we've made some unique contacts. So we did some outreach with the Clippers. We did some outreach with Metro. We did some outreach with major corporations. And now that they're doing that Black Lives Matter move, yeah, hopefully we'll be right in there with them.
The movement.
We've talked to a couple of people who said they made $1 million donations, all this big donation. So I'm like, okay, well, So I think that we're positioned well in that, but I think the biggest fear I have is that the people they uniquely hire to handle that money don't know what they're doing half the time. So it's the middleman where we get cut out, and the whole thing is we're trying to get it to where, why do we have to have a middleman? There's so much money that comes out of the local government and regional government sources, and they find these white organizations that act as middlemen to give the Black community money. And I'm like, why? You can go directly to the community and give them money. So that's our battle. That's the battle that I fight most often, is like, hey, you're picking the wrong people to dole out this money. So I think that's the problem. Yeah, these corporations are making these commitments, but who's actually going to say where these dollars go? That's the issue.
And is it going into something that can,
Benjamin
grow the dollars? I'm sorry.
Huh?
I'm sorry. I was saying, is it going into things that can grow those dollars in our community, or something that's a one and done in our community?
Exactly.
Right? Businesses that can grow those dollars and circulate them through jobs, and through other minority suppliers, then we can win in a much bigger way. When we give it somewhere where it goes and covers some events or short-term kinds of things that don't really invest at the bottom of the economic chain, that that we're not where we're going to be in 4 years. When we go back to those people, and they may or may not, there'll be somebody new that, oh, well, that's not real. In their mind, they're thinking that's not in vogue right now. And all of a sudden they're not giving contributions. Don't get, Black businesses could pay back loans if we had access to capital. This is money you could give. Half the money could be a grant, the other half could be a loan. Now, as a corporation, you have a way to win longer term with minority suppliers in every part of your organization. You have a way to win. You're getting something for the money spent. You're getting goods and services. You're just using a different supplier instead of, well, we gave some money. So I think they're taking the easy way out, and it doesn't grow the Black economy.
Right. Amen.
Well, we'll let a publisher who's not on the stream have the last word. Bobby Henry, who's good for the last words. He has a couple of last words for us. He says, this is not the first time Black people and Black causes have been pimped. We are the community, and to them, Black Lives Matter doesn't mean Black businesses do. Lisa Collins of LA Focus, Walter White, Cincinnati Herald, and Randy Fleeing of Rolling Out. We really appreciate you guys. Don't forget, tonight at 7 o'clock, the Surgeon General himself will be with us. Tomorrow, we're going to have Representative Brenda Lawrence. And Thursday, we have Dr. Anthony Fauci. So stay tuned, and everybody stay well and stay safe. Have a good day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.